remember that we did not make a route to the 10 network from the ISP or R1. Okay, it's going to come back to haunt us, but that's by design. Okay, and we took care of the host names. So let's get into NAT. All right, so remember from your diagram, you have the DMZ network, the 192.168, the physical address. And it's got the 134.68.123 as the public IP. We're going to do that natting in the ASA. And then we also have to set up PAT in number 6 to overload the workstation network so they can get out to the internet from the interface of VLAN 2, which is the outside interface. So we're going to do that. Username, that's going to be real easy. I'll come back to 8B at the very end because that's the tricky part that you really need to pay close attention to tonight. Okay, really got to pay close attention to that one tonight. So again, you're responsible for number 4. Number 5, if you remember from diagram, I'm going to ask you for a little help here because my diagram's all jacked. Go into the firewall, all right, and we need to set up the servers on the DMZ to NAT to a public IP address that's in that table on the left. Okay. So we're going to be natting from the 192.168 network to the 134.68 network. There's a couple things you have to do. All right. First and foremost, we need to create a network object for each server. The reason we need to create a network object for each server is that each individual server has a static one-for-one natting to a public IP address, a unique public IP address. Okay. So, how we do that? Go into global configuration mode. Okay. And the command is going to be object network. And here's where you always get question mark happy. You need to specify a unique name. Now, help you out here. If you look in that chart, it has web and mail and FTP. Let's go with that. Okay? The one thing that really ticks me off as an auditor is when I go in and I have to audit a firewall and they've got their mail server name Hartman or their web server, you know, name Cooley or their FTP server named Spock or something crazy off the wall. And you're like trying to figure out what in the world are they doing, okay? And they think they're being all slick because they're hiding the identity of the server. No, you're just making it harder for you to do your job, okay? So name your web server web, your mail server mail, your FTP server FTP. That's okay because it's unique to this box. That's not getting advertised out on the internet anywhere. That's not in DNS. It's not in anything that's going to be outside of this security appliance. Make sense? Okay? So kind of a little bit of a word of advice there. So I'm going to name this one web. And then what I have to do next is hit return. You see that my cursor, you see my cursor changes to configure network object. All right, and in here, I can configure a NAT, subnet, or host. I need to do one of these two first before I do NAT. Now you can also do a description, which is absolutely fine. I don't ask you to do this, but I was recently auditing a firewall of a customer, and I was so incredibly impressed. They had descriptions on everything, their interfaces, their network objects, the whole 9 yards. It was beautiful. All right, so it's good to get into a habit of doing that. So description, web dash server. It is a host, meaning it is a single IP. All right, so somebody help me out here. It's what is the physical address of the web server? It's like 192.168.0.13. Thank you. All right, that's it. Now to NAT it, type NAT, and you put the public IP address. I'm sorry, excuse me. You have to tell it from what interface to what interface it is NATing. Okay? So I'm going to go from the DMZ, which is the local, to the outside, which is the global. So it's open paren, DMZ. Does that make DMZ uppercase or lowercase? Always check that out. It's lowercase, because it goes off of this name M. Alright, so NAT, DMZ, outside, there's no spaces there. Alright. And then what type of translation is it? Is it static or dynamic? It's, in this case, it's 1-for-1, so it's static. And then the IP address, that public IP address, which is 134.68.123.13. Is that right? That's it. Okay. And you have two separate sections. You actually have your network object, which gives it its local IP address and its description. And then it's NAT, all right, below the routing. Okay? So I'll do one more, because I did two for last night's class, because they struggled with this a little bit. So I'll do the mail server. All right, so I want to do object, network, okay, host, I'm sorry, mail, call it mail. And then it's, I go into the configuration mode, and I type in host, and it's IP address, which is 192.168.0. What's the mail server?
21.
21? Okay. And then I can do NAT, DMZ, DMZ, comma, outside, close paren, static, and then the public IP, which is 134.68.123.21. And look at my show run. There it is. Okay. My mail, my web. I'll scroll up a little bit, you'll see where it is above the was there. I can put a description in there as well. I can go back into that at any time and amend it. Okay. Any questions on that? Pretty straightforward. Pretty straightforward. Okay. Now the description is optional. Just it's good to get into a habit of doing. Okay. Now for Pat, since we're going to overload the interface, all right, it's kind of automatic in the ASA. You go along the same lines, all right, of creating a object. So I'm just going to create an object called outside. And then I'm going to nat the, I'm going to create an object called inside. Okay, that's my local. And then I'm going to nat it to the outside interface. Okay, so this time, instead of making a static or a host, it's going to be a subnet. All right, and it's going to be dynamic. So I'm going to type in object network. Okay, and I'm going to call it inside for my inside network. I'm going to give it a description, inside-net. All right, and then the command, I do a question mark. Instead of host, I'm going to use subnet because it's for the entire 10.0.0.0 subnet. Okay, and it's a standard subnet mask, not a wildcard. Okay, and to set up the path, I'm going to type in nat. All right, and this time it's inside to outside, inside comma outside, dynamic, and interface. Use the interface address as mapped IP. You don't have to do anything for overload or anything of that nature. It's going to automatically do that for you. So if I look at the show run, you now see that I have that other object there, with the local subnet, and I have a dynamic NAT that is pointing to the interface. Okay. That's all you got to do for number, what was it, number 4? 6. 6? Number 6. Okay. Number 7, remember when you set up your ASA, you had to take all that DHCP stuff out? Well, now we're going to put it back in, but with the correct IP address. We're going to set up the subnet for the 10.0.0.0 network on the inside. Okay? Now, the thing with setting up DHCP is you have to set in a range. You don't set in a network like you do on a router. Okay? When you set it up, it automatically maps to the interface. It automatically maps to the interface for the gateway, so you don't set up the gateway. Okay? But you do have to tell it what DNS server you're going to use. In this case, we're using the outside DNS server 4.2.2.2. All right. So back to the firewall. All right. So we're going to work with the DHCPD command. All right. We are going to tell it the addresses. We're going to tell it the DNS. And we also have to enable the DHCP server. We've got to turn it on. Okay, so DHCPD address 10.0.0. Now, here's the thing. As long as you give me a good number of IP addresses, I don't care. All right? But remember, you do have one reserved address on that inside network, don't you? Your AD server, if you look on the diagram, it's at 10.0.0.10. Now you set up DHCP in a range, so you give it the lowest IP address and then a high IP address. Okay, so you can start at 11, 12, pretty much anything higher than 10, you're fine. Right, so you don't have a conflict with that 10.0.0.10. So I'm going to go ahead and make it 10.0.0.11 dash 10.0.0.254. tell what interface it is, so it's going to be inside. DHCPD address 10.0.0.11-10.0.254 inside. All right. I'm going to go ahead and tell it what DNS to use. So that's going to be DHCPD DNS, and then the IP address, which is 4.2.2.2 for the lab. Then I got to tell it what interface to go and look at that. So that is going to be which interface? Where's that IP going to be associated with? Yeah.
Outside.
The outside, correct. Alright, and then I just have to enable the DHCP service. DHCPD space enable. Enable inside, sorry. Enable inside. So let's let the show run for the DHCP. There's all like 3 commands. Tap your objects. Alright. So we have our IP range, we enable it on the inside, and we tell it that the DNS is on the outside at 4.2.2.2 to route all DNS queries in. Okay? Any questions on that? You guys are not talkative tonight. That's cool. Last but not least, got number 8. Now, number 8 is a little tricky. Okay, well, B is a little tricky. A is really simple. Oops. A is really, really, really simple. So let's knock that out real fast. Username, password, and that's it. It automatically encrypts it. You don't have to worry about service password encryption. Don't forget about service password encryption on the ISP or one either. And just for instructional purposes only, I'm making the administrator password change me. Don't ever do that in real life. Please. Please. That's like the top number in the top 10 of all rainbow tables. Okay. When was it change me or change me 1, 2, 3? Change me. Alright. Username, administrator, it is case sensitive. That's it. Username, administrator, password, change me. Done. There you go. Sure. As you can see, it encrypts the password for you. This is perfectly fine. Okay? Don't worry, it's going to be the same password encrypted for everybody. I'll know if you made a change me or something else. I get good at that. Okay, now for 8B, there's a little bit of a contingency. You cannot, in Packet Tracer, you can't do logging on the ASA, so don't worry about it. But you can do logging on the ISP router and on the R1 router. Okay? But you think about this real quick, and we'll go back to the diagram so we can see. Have that up. Whoops. Wait a second. Do this. Couple different ways you can do this. Alright. Now what did I tell you that we didn't need in R1 in the ISP? Because the inside network was private, we're doing a path. Static routes. Very good. Okay. But if R1 in the ISP ACL for all those servers on the DMZ. The SMTP and POP for the mail server, BlackBerry services for the mail server, web and secure web for the web server, FTP, DNS, zone transfers for the DNS server. So if I'm sending syslog traffic from the router, ISP router, and the R1 router, who can finish that thought? Who can finish that thought? What would I have to do? I'd have to allow what on that ACL?
The ISP and the R1 IPs?
For what protocol?
All of them?
All of them? All TCP? All UDP?
Sure.
No, just syslogs. I'm only talking about syslog.
514?
514 UDP. Come see me after class, David. Okay? So I have to add an ACL entry in there so that that syslog traffic goes through the firewall. If I don't, it's going to get dropped at the outside interface because it does not have a permit, or will not have a permit. We'll get to that next week, how to do that. Okay, but keep that in the back of your mind. Alright, so let's just set up the NAT real quick for that AD server. That's all we have to do on our firewall at this point in time to finish up number 8. Alright, and we have to put the logging commands into ISP and in the R1 router. Okay, so, oops, back to the laptop. Sorry about that. Object network. Wrong keyboard. Wrong bit. Object network. Okay. I'm just going to name it AD capitalized. Host. And the IP address, the local address, 10.0.0.10. Alright. Do a description here, AD-server. Alright. Then I gotta NAT it. It's inside this time to outside. It's gonna be a static, a one-for-one entry. What's my IP going to be? Anybody? There's a lot of right answers here.
134.68.
Dot.
123.
Dot.
Anything that's not.
That's anything that's not used. Anything that's not used. So what's in the? We have 13. We have 21.
25 and 53.
So what is 10 available?
Yeah.
Why not make it simple and make it match up then? 10 to 10, right?
Sold.
Don't make life hard on yourself. 134.68.123.10. Then you gotta take it till it. No, that's it. We shall run real quick. So I now have my AD server object 10.0.0.10. And then I have my NAT down here, inside to outside, where the others were DMZ to outside, because those were on the DMZ, this is on the inside network. To the static IP that I just put it to on the public space. Alright? Now, remember that address, 134.68.123.10. Let's go over to R1. Now you can do logging on the routers. The command is logging. I think you did this in another lab maybe. I'll go over it again. Logging. Alright. Host. What's the IP address of that syslog server I'm sending it to? Gonna be. Yeah, that was a softball. 134.68.123.10. Why?
Because it knows that route.
Because it knows that route already. Exactly. Exactly. Okay, and the firewall is going to translate it. The firewall is going to translate it because we set up that NAT in there. All you got to do. Now, there's other logging that you can do. You can set up traps and okay, and you can turn logging on. I guess that's actually a good idea. Logging on. So I need to do the logging host, the IP, and then logging on. Same thing on the ISP router. Logging on, logging host, 134.68.123.10. Questions on that? Anybody not understand what I did? I set the NAT up on the firewall to translate 134.68.123.10 to 10.0.0.10. Okay, and I set logging on the ISP router and R1 to go to that address. All right. Next week, remember, okay, write this down. Remember, tie a string around your finger. When we go over number 9, we will go over number 9. We got to remember to put that syslog permit in there for that ACL. Otherwise, it won't work. Okay? Because when we get into this next Thursday, we're going to start putting in some, since we're using Packet Tracer, we're going to start throwing some servers in there with some services on it. I don't know if you can do this with, I don't know, look at that. You put a server on there? That has this one? Let's play a little bit, shall we? Let's have a little bit of fun. So, if I wanted to put a server,
Except the third thing under end devices.
yeah, I was gonna say they had a specific server, it's not, okay. So, let's go ahead and configure this guy. Yeah, we have syslog there, cool, alright, so. 001. Physical, where do I put my IP address?
For this device,
Yeah, there we go. Send that 0.0.10. Okay. And we set up services on it. Let's go to syslog. Turn it on. Okay. And when syslog services come in on it, you'll see them there. And we'll do so. We'll play around with that a little bit next Tuesday when we go through number 9. Okay. But we can also, you can also, and this is not a requirement for the lab. This is to help you to set it up so you can do some testing with your ACLs and that and everything else. Like Tuesday or Thursday of next week, we'll start connecting these things up on the Z. Right, but I need to connect it first. Come on. Do my switch. Okay. And I can go into this guy. Guess it would be a good idea to rename him. Everybody see why I did, how I did that? Don't forget to save. Trust me, I did that the other day. I was like, oh, damn it. I'm gonna do this all over again. Okay. Any questions? That's all I'm gonna go over tonight for lab 3.